I am reading this poem by Trevor Ruth, who couldn't be here tonight. It's called We Must Melt, If We Must Melt. David came back yesterday. It was the third time that he'd reappeared in the past week. The first time he reappeared, I wasn't sure what to make of it. At first, I thought he was an ornament that Melinda had brought and left sitting by the pool. The shape of his body was gray and glittery in the sunlight as I watched him through the window, but I thought that it might have been the screen playing with my eyes. I went outside to look at him, and now I regret my hastiness. In the split second where my foot neared the pool, I saw it in his eyes, the gloom, the loneliness, the fear. He didn't know where he was, who I was, or even his name. I wanted to tell him that he was home, that I was his wife, and that he was my David. But he hopped into the pool and disappeared into the filter before I could say anything. There was no keeping him out of the pool. The first night we were able to swim in it. He long-armed from deep to shallow 17 times before I was able to get into my suit and outside to greet him in the darkness. Remember when we swam in the ocean that time up near Stevens Point? He asked, holding me in his arms. I think I have a starfish in my shorts. Can you check for me? Oh, stop, David. I would only be out there for a few minutes more before my legs would fail in the cold winter water. But he would still be out there, waiting through the reflection of the moon, lying on his back with his face towards the stars. On David's second reappearance, I took Melinda outside with me. We gazed intently, quietly. His legs fidgeted gangrenously to fit his awkward waddle. It's so large, Melinda said. I held my cane and kneeled as if I were lining up a shot, wondering what to tell him, if anything. He still kept looking at me with those big yellow eyes of his, shiny like a button from a pea coat. I whispered his name, and his eyes seemed to tell me that he somehow remembered my voice. I smiled and watched as he leapt forward a bit and found his place on a rock. Let me help you, ma'am, Melinda said, nursing me back to my feet. I think he just needs some time to get adjusted to this new body of his, I said, and Melinda looked at me crookedly. Let's go back inside, Miss Fallon. It's almost time for lunch. The pool was an anniversary gift from me. I was trying to match its dimensions with the pool at the motel near the beach. When I went down to take photographs of the place, I noticed how much smaller it was compared to how I remembered it. Soil settled on the marble bottom, and the walls surrounding it seemed faded in their dull colorlessness. I stared up at the railings and tried to imagine 37B with the door still open, and David leaning over the banister, breathing in the salt of the ocean air. When he finally saw the pool in the backyard, he breathed deeply and smiled. It's almost like the real thing, he said. Sometimes I can hear David outside my window at night. I think he's trying to sing for me, but he never had that lovely of a voice. Still, I like to whisper his name out to the darkness and listen for his song. The notes came irregularly, off tempo, and soft as a pistol. It echoed toward the moon and fell back toward the earth like a rocket. I took my sandwich outside and sat in a chair that was cracked by the sun. David hadn't shown up yet, but I knew that today would be a day when he'd stop by. I could feel it in the air. Birds circled overhead at rapid speed, searching for something. I told them to go find a new chimney to roost in with a mouthful of salami, my cane shaking towards the sky like the hand of a clock. I let out a deep sigh and blinked at the sun, suddenly feeling exhausted. The water in the pool left lines of chlorine on the tile. I had asked Melinda to stop cleaning the water last week, but she doesn't listen. The last time I saw him, he had been sitting quietly beside the filter. I brought his attention to the growing green scum on the tiles so that so that you thought you were home, I said with a smile. He blinked a couple of times to wet his eyes and leapt toward the grass. The slope of his back continued to lift until it was gone from my sight. I frowned and blinked at the space where he sat. But I built this for you, I said. I built this for you. The other night I couldn't sleep, so I went outside and watched the stars appear in the surface of the water. Outside, the moon took control of my legs. I stepped languidly towards the shallow end, my slippers falling behind me as if they were moonlight. The metal clatter of my cane followed the cool and silent gravity of the water as I descended the stairs, my clothing meandering around me like a bed of seaweed. I imagine that this is what David feels each time he enters the pool, the curving ripples radiating from his backstrokes, the weightlessness of his body as he treads through the reflecting sky, and the cool air on the sections of his flesh that floated above the water. As I stare into the sky, I try to think about the movement of his legs as they mimic the constraining and extending of wings. Thank you.